Hi, thanks for having me. That's a tough act to follow. He did a fantastic job. Yeah, my name is Dean Carlson. I'm from Wybrook Farm. I wanted to talk to you today about the impossibility of infinite exponential growth, why that's impossible in a finite world, and what that could possibly have to do with farming. Um, I guess if you'd asked my friends and family 10 years ago, they would have said I was the least likely person to be talking to you about this topic. I graduated from the University of Chicago with a degree in economics. Like they said, I went to work on Wall Street for 15 years as a bond and derivatives trader. I had no background whatsoever in agriculture, but I just became interested in over time. One of the things that always bothered me in finance and our economy in general was the fact that we always had to be growing. I didn't understand why it wasn't good enough for us to reach, as a society, that we would be rich enough. Why did we continue to have to grow all the time? And I guess one of the problems with that, or one of the reasons for that, is that we always have this intention to focus on things in the present rather than the future. You know, that probably comes from our hunter-gatherer brain, that we were incentivized to think about things now rather than later. Even in finance, it's true. You learn, one of the first things that you learn is to discount the value of things in the future back to a present value. And if you take things far enough out into the future, they become virtually worthless. And it's this problem, I think, that helps or causes us to miss the implications of exponential growth. So what is exponential growth? Dr. Albert Bartlett, a professor emeritus at Colorado State University, has said the greatest shortcoming of the human race is our inability to understand the exponential function. The exponential function is simply a constant rate of growth on a continuously growing base over a period of time. It'd be impossible to turn on the TV, look at a newspaper, without seeing some reference to this kind of growth. We assume that human population will continue to grow at 1 to 2% a year. We expect our economy to grow at 3 to 4% a year without really understanding what that means. So one way to think about or to gain an implication from that is to use what's called the rule of 70. So if you take 70 divided by an annual growth rate, that'll tell you how long it takes for something to double in size. So if you use human population growing at 1%, only 1% seems like nothing, but it means if you take 70 divided by 1, it would double in 70 years. If human population grew at 2%, it would double in 35 years. And our economy, if it grows at 4%, it would double every 17 and a half years. Another interesting fact about this doubling is that in 10 doublings, the size of something is 1,000 times larger than at the beginning. In 20 doublings, it's 1,000,000 times larger. So like I said, we see this all the time without really thinking about what it means. One other interesting note about those doublings is in each of the doubling periods, the amount of growth is larger than all of the previous growth combined. So if you think about that, if the amount of oil we use every year was increasing by 4%, that means it would double in 17 and a half years. That also means that we would have used more oil in that 17 and a half years than all of humanity had used combined. So it's something that obviously has an impact on the world that we live in. There's another interesting example from this guy, Dr. Bartlett, that I saw, and he has some really, if this is an interesting concept, he has some really cool YouTube videos where you can hear more about this. But it talks about how time speeds up as you move along this exponential curve. So imagine, if you will, you have a bottle that has one bacterium in it. The bacteria will divide every minute so that they'll double every minute. By 12 o'clock, it starts at 11 o'clock. By 12 o'clock, the bottle's completely full. So think about if you were living in that bottle, at what point you would start to get nervous that you're running out of room. So at what point would the bottle be half full? Well, that's easy if you work backwards, because since it doubles every minute, it would be 11:59. It'd be half full. So in that last minute, it doubles. But even at 11:55, the bottle is only 3% full and 97% empty. So you can imagine all the leaders of the bacteria trying to convince you that there's no problem. There's 97% of the bottles left. There's 32 times more space in the bottle, but you only have 5 minutes left. Now imagine that these bacteria, these very ingenious bacteria, go out and drill in the Arctic. They start hydraulically fracturing the ground to discover 3 new bottles. Surely that would buy them a lot of extra time. But in fact, it only buys them an extra 2 minutes to 12:02. So the problem isn't that they can't find enough space, the problem is that they're growing. So all of these things are true. These graphs that you see of human population are true of natural resource use. So we continue to use more and more natural resource every year, and the graphs of their use look something like this. The most important ones of those, of course, are energy. Our entire civilization, our entire economy is built on using energy. And we know that most of that is fossil fuels. And we know or should know that that's a non-renewable source. It's something that we will run out of. We can all argue about how much of any one natural resource there is, but I haven't heard anyone arguing that the size of the earth is getting bigger. So we have to learn to live within the limits. This is especially true of agriculture, and this is where it starts to get into sustainable farming. If you look at the way that we grow food in this country, it's incredibly fossil fuel intensive. We use 10 calories of fuel for every calorie of food we produce. That's something that we get away with in the short run, but it's something that future generations, I think, will look back and say, why did you waste all of our energy just to grow your food? So, like I said, modern agriculture is the use of land to convert petroleum into food, and that's the system that we are in now. So what is sustainable farming? Sustainable farming simply looks to grow food in a way on a given piece of land that can be repeated over and over, because it's not relying on inputs that are finite or that are non-renewable sources. So basically that's a grass-based system. Grass is a perennial. It doesn't have to be replanted every year. By grazing animals across it, you're actually increasing the topsoil. If you look at modern farming, total arable farmland in the world is actually decreasing due to soil erosion from bad farming practices. And even now in the modern system, after decades of increase of crop yields are starting to top out as the plants reach their biological limits. So we're going to have to find more renewable ways to grow food. If you think about it in this grass-based system, in a way, it's like turning solar energy into human calories. We can't digest cellulose, but cows can and herbivores can. So by using this system, it's a way of turning solar energy into human calories, and in effect, you're eating sunshine. And it's something that's incredibly renewable because if you think about it, the only inputs are sunshine and water, and those are renewable sources. So it's with all of these things in mind that I decided to personally get involved in growing food this way. It's funny, a few years ago, I went to listen to a famous investor, Jim Rogers, who co-founded the Quantum Fund with George Soros, speak to a group of MBAs at Wharton, and in response to a question about career advice, he told them all that they should quit school and go become farmers. And I'm pretty sure I'm the only one that listened to it. But I know that in the future, it's going to be important that there are people that know how to grow food in this way. So I decided in 2010 to buy this farm, Wybrook. Spent 2 years doing construction and getting the animals ready. And you can see that we use a grass-based system. All of the animals are living outside. We raise grass-fed beef. We raise our pigs out in the woods. All the chickens are raised on pasture. And we sell the products of the farm through our store and restaurant. But you can see some pictures of what that actually looks like. Cute animals. So I've often wondered why it is that other people don't see these implications of exponential growth. I know I'm not the only person in the world that's thought of this. In fact, in the late 1700s, Thomas Malthus wrote a famous book about how the geometrically increasing portion of human population would soon outstrip our ability to feed ourselves. But he had no idea at that time that we would find a way to turn fossil fuels into food. But as we know, fossil fuels are a limited resource as well. Even in the 70s, the Club of Rome wrote an important book called Limits to Growth that outlined a lot of these topics that I talked about today, but those have been largely ignored. I have very little faith in governments to make these changes, but we as individuals and communities have the power to make the changes. It doesn't take a crisis for us to realize that this is going to be a problem down the road. And it's something that I was really encouraged about to see that you guys have a sustainability club. And it was something that you were thinking about already. Because it's going to be your generation that's going to have to make that change. Like I said, I don't see how governments will be the one to do it. But the ways that you can make a difference are really easy. First of all, every dollar that you spend on your food is a vote for how the next animal or the next piece of food is going to be raised. That's how you make a difference, by choosing to make good choices and sustainable choices in everything that you buy. So my job is simply to provide that option for you. Thanks for having me.